Nearly 3 decades after a college student disappeared without a trace, investigators returned to the case once again, searching a location they believed could still hold answers. For Kristin Smart's family, every new search has carried the same hope that one day they might finally learn where she is. How could someone vanish after a night out on a college campus, and why would detectives still be searching so many years later? Those questions have defined one of California's most closely followed criminal investigations. Tonight, we're retracing the timeline, examining the evidence presented by investigators and in court, and separating confirmed facts from the many rumors that have surrounded this case for years. Because behind every headline was a 19-year-old whose future ended far too soon. Before Kristin Smart became the focus of one of the longest-running missing person investigations in California, she was simply a young woman beginning an exciting new chapter of her life. Kristin Denise Smart was 19 years old and had recently completed her first year at California Polytechnic State University, better known as Cal Poly, in San Luis Obispo. Friends and family described her as intelligent, kind, and independent. Like many college freshmen, she was adjusting to campus life while looking ahead to summer break. Memorial Day weekend in 1996 marked the unofficial end of the academic year. Students gathered across campus to celebrate before heading home for the summer. No one could have imagined that it would be the last weekend anyone would see Kristin alive. On the evening of May 24, Kristin attended an off-campus party. According to witness accounts documented during the investigation, she spent time socializing with other students throughout the night. As the gathering came to an end in the early hours of May 25, several people noticed that Kristin appeared heavily intoxicated and was having difficulty walking. Those observations were later confirmed by multiple witnesses interviewed by investigators. Concerned for her safety, a small group of students began walking her back toward her residence hall. The walk would become one of the most scrutinized timelines in California criminal history. Witnesses later told investigators that, as the group continued, people gradually separated and headed in different directions. By the end of the walk, Kristin was no longer with the group. Exactly what happened after that remains one of the central questions in the case. Investigators would spend years reconstructing those final known moments, comparing witness statements, timelines, and physical evidence in an effort to understand what occurred after Kristin was last seen. When Kristin failed to contact her family or return home as expected, concern quickly turned into alarm. Search efforts began, volunteers distributed flyers, and investigators started interviewing students who had attended the party or seen Kristin that night. At first, there was hope that she had simply left campus unexpectedly. But as the days passed with no confirmed sightings, that hope began to fade. The disappearance soon became far more than a missing person investigation. It became a case that would challenge investigators for decades. One question now stood above all the others. Who was the last person to see Kristin Smart alive? The answer would shape the investigation for years to come. By the morning of May 25, 1996, Kristin Smart had vanished. What should have been the beginning of Memorial Day weekend quickly turned into a desperate search for answers. But in those critical first hours, no one knew they were witnessing the start of an investigation that would span decades. When Kristin failed to return to her dorm room or contact her family, concern grew rapidly. Her belongings, including personal items she would have been expected to take if she planned to leave, remained behind. According to investigators, there was no verified evidence that Kristin had voluntarily disappeared. As family members and friends realized something was seriously wrong, campus police and local law enforcement began interviewing students who had attended the party where Kristin was last seen. Each interview added another piece to the timeline. But one name appeared again and again. Several witnesses told investigators they had seen Kristin struggling to walk after the party. Those accounts consistently described a small group of students helping her make her way back toward campus. Among them was fellow Cal Poly student Paul Flores. According to witness statements, Flores remained with Kristin after others had gone their separate ways. Investigators later identified him as the last known person reported to have been with her. That fact, supported by witness testimony, would become one of the most significant elements of the investigation. What happened after that point has never been established through eyewitness testimony. No one has ever come forward claiming to have seen Kristin after she and Flores were last reported walking together. As the investigation intensified, search teams combed hillsides, wooded areas, and surrounding properties. Volunteers joined law enforcement, hoping to find any clue that could lead them to Kristin. Days turned into weeks. Weeks turned into months. Despite extensive searches, investigators found no trace of her. For Kristin's family, every unanswered day became another painful reminder that time was slipping away. Investigators continued interviewing witnesses, comparing statements, and examining inconsistencies. Over the years, detectives publicly acknowledged that Paul Flores remained a primary focus of the investigation. Flores consistently denied any involvement in Kristin's disappearance. It's important to distinguish that from later legal proceedings. At this stage of the investigation, detectives were building a case based on witness accounts, physical evidence, and continued investigative work, not public speculation. Still, one question lingered. If Kristin never made it back to her dorm, where did she go? And if someone knew the answer, why had they stayed silent? Years passed. New investigators inherited old case files. Advances in forensic science offered possibilities that simply hadn't existed in 1996. The mystery that once seemed impossible to solve was about to take an unexpected turn. Before we continue, if you appreciate respectful, thoroughly researched investigations that focus on the facts and honor the people at the heart of these stories, consider subscribing to Mind Whisper Mysteries and leaving a like on this video. It helps us continue producing in-depth documentaries on cases that deserve to be remembered. And if you have thoughts on this investigation so far, share them respectfully in the comments. Because after more than 2 decades of unanswered questions, investigators believed new evidence had finally brought them closer than ever to discovering what happened to Kristin Smart. And that would change this case forever. For years, Kristin Smart's disappearance remained one of California's most enduring unsolved cases. The investigation never officially closed, but as time passed, many wondered whether the truth would ever come to light. Behind the scenes, however, detectives continued reviewing evidence, re-interviewing witnesses, and following new leads as investigative techniques advanced. As the case was revisited, investigators compared earlier witness statements with newly gathered information. Search warrants were executed at multiple locations connected to the investigation over the years. Authorities also employed updated forensic methods that were unavailable in 1996. Hopping advances in science could reveal evidence that had previously gone undetected. Investigators publicly stated that they believed Kristin had been the victim of a homicide, even though her remains had not been recovered. That conclusion was based on the totality of the evidence gathered during the investigation. It's important to note that, at this stage, many details remained known only to investigators and had not yet been tested in court. In 2021, after decades of investigation, authorities announced a major development. Paul Flores was arrested and charged with Kristin Smart's murder. His father, Ruben Flores, was charged separately with allegedly helping conceal Kristin's body after her death. Both men pleaded not guilty to the charges. For Kristin's family, the arrests marked a significant turning point after nearly 25 years of waiting. But an arrest is not a conviction. The evidence would now be examined in court, where prosecutors would bear the burden of proving their case beyond a reasonable doubt. During the trial, prosecutors presented witness testimony, forensic findings, and evidence they argued demonstrated what had happened to Kristin after she disappeared. The defense challenged the prosecution's interpretation of that evidence, arguing that the case relied heavily on circumstantial evidence and that Kristin's body had never been found. As in many homicide cases without recovered remains, the jury was tasked with evaluating the totality of the evidence rather than relying on a single piece of proof. After hearing weeks of testimony, the jury reached its decision. Paul Flores was found guilty of first-degree murder in connection with Kristin Smart's death. Ruben Flores was acquitted of the charge that he helped conceal Kristin's body. Those verdicts reflected the jury's assessment of the evidence presented during the trial. Although the conviction answered one important legal question, it did not answer every question that mattered. Kristin's remains have never been recovered. For her family, that means one of the most painful uncertainties still remains. Where is Kristin Smart? That question continued to guide investigators even after the trial concluded. Nearly 30 years after Kristin disappeared, detectives returned to search locations connected to the case once again. Why would investigators revisit the scene after so much time had passed? And were they searching for the final piece of a mystery that had haunted a family for nearly 3 decades? Those questions bring us to the final chapter of Kristin Smart's story. For many criminal investigations, a conviction marks the end of the story. For Kristin Smart's family, it did not. One question has remained unanswered since the early morning hours of May 25, 1996. Where is Kristin? Nearly 3 decades after she disappeared, investigators returned to a property connected to the case with search warrants, carefully examining the area once again. The renewed search underscored a reality that has defined this investigation from the beginning. Although the legal case resulted in a murder conviction, the search for Kristin herself has never ended. Authorities have not publicly disclosed every detail that led to the latest search, and investigators have been careful about what information they release while investigative work continues. What they have made clear is that they remain committed to locating Kristin's remains. For families of missing victims, recovering a loved one is about more than evidence. It's about dignity. It's about having a place to grieve. And it's about finally bringing someone home. Throughout the years, Kristin's parents never stopped speaking about their daughter, not simply as the center of a criminal case, but as the young woman they lost. They have consistently thanked investigators, volunteers, journalists, and members of the public who continued to keep Kristin's name alive. Their persistence also helped shine a light on the importance of thoroughly investigating missing person cases, even when years pass without answers. Kristin's story has influenced conversations about campus safety, investigative persistence, and the role that advancing forensic techniques can play in long-term cases. It also serves as a reminder that time does not erase the need for justice. While many questions surrounding Kristin's disappearance were addressed through the investigation and the trial, not every mystery has been resolved. Authorities have not recovered Kristin's remains. Investigators have not publicly answered every question surrounding what happened after she was last seen. Those unknowns continue to matter, not because they invite speculation, but because they represent a family still waiting for complete answers. As responsible storytellers, it's important to distinguish between what has been established through the courts and what remains unknown. The conviction of Paul Flores resolved the criminal case against him. But unanswered questions about Kristin's final resting place remain exactly that, unanswered. Kristin Smart was 19 years old. She was a daughter, a sister, a friend, a college student looking forward to the future. Her story is remembered not because of the person convicted in connection with her death, but because of the life she lived and the people who continue to miss her every day. If there is one lesson to take from this case, it is that perseverance matters. Investigators continued searching long after many believed the trail had gone cold. Journalists continued asking questions. Witnesses came forward. And Kristin's family never stopped hoping for the day they could finally bring her home. If you found this documentary thoughtful and informative, please consider subscribing to Mind Whisper Mysteries. We strive to tell these stories with care, accuracy, and respect for the people at their center. If you'd like to join the conversation, share your thoughts in the comments, but please keep the discussion respectful. Behind every investigation is a real family whose lives were changed forever. And if you know someone who values carefully researched true crime documentaries, consider sharing this video with them. Some mysteries are measured not only by the questions they leave behind, but by the determination of those who refuse to stop searching. Kristin Smart's story is one of loss, perseverance, and the enduring hope that, one day, every missing person will be found. Because behind every mystery is a real person. And every person deserves to be remembered.